From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Alexis, codename Doc Holliday Jackson. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is the top of what people these days are calling the week, which means that it is Monday if you are hearing this the day it comes out. Folks, as always, we have original episodes coming to you twice a week, and we want to take the time to get away from the episodes a little bit, give you what we call strange news and listener mail segments once each week to tell you what's on our minds, on the world's minds, and as always, to tell you some of the stuff that certain establishments may not want you to know about the news. The nation of Japan is urging younger generations to get this, drink more alcohol. Texas has fallen in all sorts of directions with the letter of the law versus the spirit of their religious intent. But we know that people are also worried about water, which we predicted a number of years ago. But before we get to any of that, we have some housekeeping announcements here in the world of conspiracy realism. Many of our fellow listeners have written to us and said, hey, I ordered the book. Thank you for doing so, by the way. But I am someone who likes to encounter their books or experience them in an audio format. Matt, Noel, people are asking whether we have an audio book. So on behalf of everyone tuning in, are the rumors true? Do we have an audio book? Can we talk about it?
I think we can talk about it. It doesn't exist in the world quite yet, but it will very, very soon. It is the audio version of the Stuff They Don't Want You to Know book that will be hitting shelves in a physical form on October 11th. Pre-order your copy now. Link available in our link tree on Instagram. But yeah, we each of the three of us took our turns, kind of round robining the chapters and doing the audiobook version. And I personally can say I had a blast doing it. It's definitely different than just riffing on the podcast, but I think it's going to be a really fun listen.
That's right. And if you want to celebrate the book coming out by hanging out with us, we're going on a little bit of a tour. We're going to be in Atlanta on October 11th, in Washington, D.C. on the 13th of October, and on the 14th in Plainville, Massachusetts. Check out the website stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com. Again, stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com to check out those tour dates and register to hang out with us today.
And for everyone who's written in across the world saying, hey, can you get over to London? Can you get over to Denver? Can you get over to Kinshasa? Can you get over to Perth? We would love to. And to do so, the best way to be the change you wish to see in the world is to write to us at conspiracy@iheartradio.com. I have no compunction about forwarding those messages and saying, hey, put us on the road, because we love hanging out together in person. We are actual friends. And when we say we're actual friends, we're counting you in that crew. So we would love to be part of your day-to-day experience. And we are grateful that you are a part of ours.
Also, buy the book, and then our overlords will be like, yo, book sales are doing well. Let's send you to Perth. Post haste.
That's the best way to get us there. Pre-order a ton of books in your city. Now, tell your friends.
Tell your drug dealer, tell your parole officer, tell your handler at the company, because I don't know if you guys heard this. We are on this show, a lot of our fellow listeners are tuning in, and one of the front ads they're getting, which I'll talk about later in a few weeks, one of the front ads they're getting is a CIA recruitment ad, which is so interesting because back in my day, they weren't doing ads on podcasts, but story for another time. We would also...
That happened on our show in 2015 or 16 as well.
Ooh.
I recall the CIA was all about it.
One of you did it. At least a few of you are company folk now. Congratulations. Stay safe. Don't believe your bosses. So we also have been on the road, as you've heard, and a couple of us traveled out to Texas. Texas, the Lone Star State, is always going to be chock full of stuff they don't want you to know. Recently, Noel, you encountered something not just in one state, but in a couple that I think I would like to say, not to speak for all of us, but I would like to go on air saying it gave me a chuckle because we have an upcoming secret episode about a related topic. What is that secret episode, you may be asking? Well, if you order the book, this last time I'm gonna shill for it on this strange news segment. If you order the book, you'll be able to hear that secret episode. If not, then you're just gonna have to read some tea leaves about the story we are about to share.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to use the term book ban right up front because that's like super loaded, but there are some laws swirling around certain states in our fair union, one of which is Texas, that are seeking to make it a little easier for the powers that be to remove certain books from the libraries, of young people. God, I sound like a grandpapa, young people. But it's true. Like all of us, have grown up reading books that were assigned to us, and certain ones than others maybe were a little controversial. Things like Lord of the Flies, for example. Certain books like Slaughterhouse-Five, exactly. Books that, are a little edgy potentially, or have some other lore kind of associated with them. Catcher in the Rye, for example, is a book that often is associated with like school shooters, even though the South Park episode that sort of like lampoons that whole thing points out that nothing really that remarkable happens in the book. He doesn't school shoot. He doesn't really hurt anybody. He's just sort of got a bad attitude. But it is a book that, in the right hands can kind of like, give way to a certain mindset of being, othered, of being like the person that everyone else is out to get. So it's easy if you're looking for blood and guts and gore, you get a book like that. It's sort of laughable. But there are things in books that can be dangerous in the wrong hands, or the right hands, I guess. But that's the point of literature. We're able to, make our own decisions. But certain people in power, school boards and the like, and the governing bodies, that govern school boards, think that certain books maybe should not be in the hands of young people. In places like Texas and Florida, that tends to have a lean towards puritanical kind of religious ideology, whereas like the idea of being indoctrinated, by the left or something like that. And this new kind of smattering of laws that have been making the rounds really seeks to empower school boards to, have a heavier hand in pulling books from libraries. And in Texas in particular, a school called Keller ISD was a really interesting case study in one of these laws. Essentially, they've had this for a while, where, there are individuals that have like these kind of committees that examine books that are, on the shelves in school libraries and say, okay, we need to like take a closer look at these. But apparently this had already happened the previous year. A lot of these books had already kind of made the cut. And all of a sudden with this new law, they were re-examined. And the irony here is that one of these books was the Bible, the Bible, all versions. In fact, an email that circulated from the district, the school board there at Keller ISD and the district they're a part of, had a kind of like a spreadsheet with a lot of these books that needed to have another look given to them, and it literally says the Bible in parentheses, all versions. And I don't know, like, is this an oversight? Like, this is clearly the reporting on this. This is from about 2 weeks ago, but I think this is like a larger conversation. The Bible was not banned in Texas schools. That is a very alarmist view. But the fact that like whatever kind of broad strokes, kind of blunt instrument approach to censoring books or towards taking a very keen eye towards material that is inappropriate, quote unquote, for students, somehow this one got caught up in the net. So this email that went out said, attached are a list of books challenged. That's the word they use, or the term challenged this year. By the end of today, I need all the books pulled from the library and classrooms. More information will be sent regarding actions for these books. And included in that list was the Bible, all versions, and Anne Frank's diary. Not the book, though, a graphic novel adaptation, which is interesting because it makes me think that this is a very imprecise kind of methodology that goes into this, because there was controversy around Anne Frank's diary in the past, not because of what it said about, you know, the Nazis and because of violence or whatever, but specifically because in a certain version of the book, Anne Frank talks about getting her period. And there were certain people that thought that was inappropriate for kids of a certain age to hear about, you know, a young woman getting her period.
Yeah, but does that not feel a bit disingenuous at most? I mean, that, you know, full disclosure, I recently visited the Anne Frank house, and this it just feels as though someone were trying to find a reason to have a problem. Like, okay, let's walk through the structural reasoning. The idea there, we'll be very quick about this, obviously. The idea there is, hey, I have no problem with children learning firsthand about the dangers of genocide, but I don't want, for some reason, I don't want, say the authorities, for people to know about the idea of menstruation, despite the fact that roughly half of the reading audience is going to have firsthand knowledge about that experience, if not while they're reading, very soon. What do you do as authority? You treat that as Santa Claus? It just feels very insincere.
Oh, 100%. But that is, it was a long time ago that was the issue at hand. It's the same with like that book Mouse, a graphic novel Mouse, which is about, you know, yes, Nazism, but like from the perspective of these like kind of anthropomorphized mice characters, which is a, you know, very powerful piece of graphic literature. But perhaps there was some bad language or there was something in it that was visually disturbing or whatever. But how the Bible made this list is simultaneously bonkers to me and also makes a lot of sense, because what book? Yeah.
Book of Songs.
You got Mouse there?
I was going to show you just the swastika.
Yeah.
The swastika that's on there is why
there is a swastika.
I understand why people might be like, hey, maybe.
Yeah. Well, there's a beef story about Mouse, but moving on, as you're saying, Noel,
let's get back to the Bible. I mean, of all the books that could potentially be banned, I mean, the Bible is full of sex and violence,
Book
and
of
gore
Songs is hot.
and misery. And I mean, you know, our Christ, our Lord and Savior, was nailed to a cross and, you know, stabbed in the side and well, you know, I'm in the parlance of Christianity, you know, forced to wear a crown of thorns. I mean, as we all know, the Mel Gibson film, The Passion of the Christ, was massively popular amongst the Christian community, but when you really watch it, it is ultimately like torture porn. It is incredibly sadistic in the violence that it portrays. So I do think it's interesting that like the Bible is unimpeachable in terms of like literature, but the fact that it made the list here is very fascinating to me. Like, what is the mechanism of discerning, you know, what is and is not appropriate for young people to have access to in the library, especially in a state like Texas, where obviously, you know, Jesus is everything. And like, you know, religion is a massive mover and shaper of policy and ideology and upbringing and all of that good stuff. So it makes me really question what the mechanism of looking through and deciding what books, it feels like someone made a mistake. And it obviously was a very sexy headline to say Texas bans the Bible. Like, have we gone too far? I mean, you could say yes, but then if you look at Snopes, like, no, Texas did not ban the Bible. It got momentarily pulled. But even the physical act of pulling the Bible from a library, doesn't that seem like heresy to you? Or it would seem like that to some?
I don't know.
Get your hands off of our Bibles. I mean, that's interesting.
On the version, Christian authorities historically are the most likely to pull Christian lore to which they object. That's the whole reason that there's Apocrypha, right, versus canonical books. But still, yes, I agree with you. It does seem kind of reflexive, reactive, and it does make for a good headline. It also makes for a good clarion call. Education is one of the most vital battlegrounds of any civilization throughout history. Not for nothing was it illegal for certain classes of different civilizations past to possess the power of literacy, which is very much a superpower. And this means, like, this, I think, shows us how, I'll do it, how devilishly easy it is to remove one's access to education for anybody who doesn't realize what a big deal this is, how existential this is. I do recommend checking out our previous episode on the war over textbooks, because all textbooks are not telling you and your children the same stories.
Oh, 100%. And Matt, I know you have a Christian background, and, I know that you probably took great effort to read the Bible and digest the Bible, and did Bible study and were encouraged to do so. But was there ever a point in your upbringing where you were questioning, like, wow, this is kind of messed up, the stuff that's in here? Not in terms of ideology, but just in terms of content, in terms of the violence and the sex and the kind of depravity that is represented in the pages of the Bible.
No, because a lot of my study was guided by, at least early on, by the Methodist Church, and what the Methodist Church was instructing pastors throughout the country to, teach that week or that month or whatever. Mm-hmm. And often you're so focused in on, a handful of stories that you don't even venture out into the other territory unless you're doing it on your own. And when you encounter it on your own, you have a lot of questions, right? Like I did. I was always like, whoa, what? What does that mean? Why is this in here? But I would never go to a pastor or someone who knew better than me and say, hey, why? It was just like, I'll just leave that over here in my cognitive, I don't know, in the way I think about the Bible.
It is very curated. I grew up in the Methodist Church as well, and it's all these little exercises and things that guide you, and they give you the that's why everything in the Bible is citable. It's all these chapter and verse, because it's all meant to be taken in these little nuggets. But when you read the whole thing taken as a whole, it does beget a lot of questions and a lot of contradictions that you want to know why they exist. And they're sort of pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Just look at this one and do your little workbook assignment and then move on. That's kind of the attitude. So it is interesting to me that no one in religious upbringing typically, as kids, encourages kids to read the whole Bible. That is not a thing. They don't give you a book report to read the whole Bible. They make you study little parts. I will soft push back about that, because there are many Christians that I know who were just like kids in Islam. They were tasked with reading the entirety and welcomed to ask questions. I personally do not ascribe to Christianity myself, but I have read multiple versions of the Bible, including the most famous ones in Western canon, like the people love the King James Bible nowadays. They're all translations, and I remain, although again I don't personally ascribe to a lot of those beliefs, I remain grateful for the people who said, read the whole book before you disagree with it. Ask us the questions and let's explore them together. And I think that kind of thought, that structural application of thought, is a big piece
of our show. I did not know you were both raised Methodist. Refresh my memory. That denomination does baptism by sprinkling holy water, right? Rather than by dunking someone in water. Mm-hmm. Right?
It's like soft Baptist, kind of. It's like their Baptist religion is a little more hard in the paint, and Methodism is a little softer and more like, accessible, I would argue.
I would say somber and serious. Methodist is serious about it.
It is, but it also has praise and worship bands and youth group where you eat tacos and stuff. Like, it doesn't have all the pomp and circumstance of a Baptist, church service. It has much more of this like modern kind of like, like the Righteous Gemstones are probably meant to be Methodist. They don't really go and talk about that in the show, but that is the experience that I had with Methodism, where it's like this wow mazzow kind of like production of like, rock and roll kind of like youth group bands and stuff like that.
I know that we have many, many people who are adherents to many, many faiths in our audience today. And folks, if you have ever found yourself saying, based on an excerpt of something that has maybe been spun or presented or curated for you based on an excerpt of a religious text, if you find yourself completely objecting to it, then I will say, and I do not really practice advice, I will say as an observation that if you intellectually respect yourself and you intellectually respect those with whom you disagree, and you should respect those, then you owe it to yourself as a dissenter to say, I am informed. I, again, have read multiple religious texts. I read the Bible in full. And look, I'm going to tell you, it's uneven writing. There's some real sexy stuff, like the Book of Songs. There's some real, there's a couple of things that are all just this person begat this person who begat this person. And
that first part, man, that old part.
Right. Yeah, and there's some neat literal things like the tree of life, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, also on a thing that functions visually very much like a tree. It's interesting. And if you disagree with something, you owe it to yourself to understand that with which you disagree. Not for nothing did Lucifer say non serviam. I brought it back. We were talking about that off air. Okay, I did it. All right.
Yeah, that's a great word. I will ask you guys this. Are there versions of the Quran? Versions in the way there are of the Bible, to be able to even say in parentheses, all versions, that implies, and we know the King James Version has a spin, just like you mentioned earlier, Ben, our textbooks have spins, depending on the ideology of, the school board or whatever, which parts we want to leave out, which parts we want to like big up or whatever. Like, does the Quran have versions?
It's okay. I can answer this. And I want our fellow followers of Islam and I want our fellow Muslims in the crowd to write in and talk about this, because there are canonically not different versions of the Quran. There are different versions of reciting it, right? And there are different versions of the idea of the true representative philosophy laid down by the prophet. The most well-known in the West would be Sunni and Shia, right? But that's not the same thing as you see in, LDS, or as you see in a Anglican interpretation or a Baptist interpretation of the Christian Bible, which is already sort of it's sort of the remix of ancient Judaic text with this new, it's the double album.
Maybe I'm asking kind of a silly question, because obviously, like in translation, you're going to have different versions. Like the very act of translation is inherently a version, and the translator, has a lot of power.
Which is why the Quran is only Quran if it's in Arabic.
That's right. But with the Bible, you have like the King James Version, which we know is a massive spin on like the content of the Bible at the behest of King James, to kind of like use that as a means to kind of like enact some of his, policies and ideas. So we're kind of getting in the weeds here, but I do think it's interesting to think about the Bible in the same way we think about the way textbooks are presenting a certain narrative. And the thing that's interesting about the Bible to me too is like some parts are very historical record, documentation of historical events. And some parts of it are these like parables or like, is it real? Did it really happen? They don't really tell you in the text. You have to kind of decide for yourself. And then we have in the same way, like we have lawmakers that are strict constructionists of the Constitution. They look at it as if it's written down, then that's the thing. And there's no room for interpretation. There are people that look at the Bible that way too. Like if it's in the Bible, then it definitely happened in terms of like Noah's Ark and, the whale and all of that stuff, which clearly, if you look at it from a place of pop culture, that stuff is stories. That stuff is like meant to teach a lesson, but I don't think Noah made an ark and put all the animals on it. Matt, what do you think about that side of it?
Just about Noah's Ark or the literal interpretation? No,
just about like the parts of the Bible that are clearly literal and the parts of the Bible that are like these massively spectacular tales.
I mean, they're the best parts of the book, in my opinion. They're also probably one of the main reasons I kind of lost my religion a little bit, was because it was trying to square what was supposed to be taken literally and what was supposed to be a parable, what was, in my mind, clearly a made up story to make a point, I guess, or to teach a lesson. And then not being able to really discern what was which. That's where I had my cognitive dissonance. But, enough about me.
No. And to not have the person guiding you along be able to tell you the difference, maybe, like, and why these things didn't square with you. You didn't have anybody that could explain to you the way you felt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, we have to move on, but I want to just part and parcel to what we're talking about here. Florida, also one of these laws, created a situation where they are refusing donations of dictionaries. What could be a more innocuous text than a dictionary? That's my whole point. Is like, what is the rubric for like, what texts are we rejecting versus what texts are we like welcoming? And if a dictionary is getting banned, again, not banned, but like questioned, we're like, oh, we're putting a pause on accepting dictionaries for the time being. Then where is the cutoff? Like, at what point are we just like losing the plot in terms of like what literature and text actually is for?
It's a great point.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more strange news.
And we're back. And for this story, we are traveling to Jackson, Mississippi. It's a pretty great city, actually. I don't know, have you guys ever been to Jackson?
Yes.
Been a lot of songs on Jackson.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to Jackson because the citizens there are going through a crisis similar to citizens of other cities in the United States and across the world. There are a lot of crises going on right now, and there have been for quite a while. This one is probably closest to the coverage we've done before on Flint, Michigan, and a couple other cities that are going through water treatment plant crises. But dang, Jackson is it seems like it's getting hit just blow after blow. There was recently a lot of flooding in Jackson and other parts of central Mississippi. The Pearl River flooded due to just record rainfall that was occurring around that time. And all of that water coming through Jackson caused some serious issues with their water treatment system. And, well, I guess I'll let the governor of Mississippi really sum it up for us. On Monday, as we record this, Monday, August 29th, there was an emergency press briefing given by the Mississippi governor, Tate Reeves, and this is what he said. Quote, "Please stay safe. Do not drink the water."
Jesus.
Yeah, seriously, like that alone. Good God. "In too many cases, it is raw water from the reservoir being pushed through the pipes. Be smart, protect yourself, protect your family, preserve water, look out for your fellow man, and look out for your neighbors."
Mm-hmm. And God save America. I mean, that's crazy.
That's Independence Day level speech right there.
Dude, correct. That is wild.
Yeah, it's like sorry, I hate when people say correct. No, yeah, right on. I agree with you. This is also, for anybody unfamiliar with Mississippi in the U.S., This is the largest city in that state. We are talking about just one city with more than 160,000 residents. If you look at the metro area, then that means that this water issue affects way more than 200,000 people. This is serious.
Yeah, the latest estimates I saw were around 180,000, but you're right, like up to 200,000 who are being affected directly by this. I'm going to continue with the governor's quote just a little bit more because it shows why he's speaking in such a dire manner. The governor said, quote, "Until it is fixed, we do not have reliable running water at scale. The city cannot provide enough water to fight fires, to flush toilets, and to meet other critical needs." Like that alone, like restaurants don't have water. The tap, when you turn it on, the water pressure is so low that barely anything comes out. And when it does come out, it's raw water from the giant reservoir that is just northeast of the city, where the Pearl River comes out of as it's flowing
Which
through
is
Jackson.
not a marketing thing. But by raw water, we mean untreated. So it is, it is completely a dice roll. And let's be honest, if you live in the U.S., you know this. It is a loaded dice roll as to whether this stuff has effluents.
Dumping.
Right. Effluents would be dumping as whether it has possible bacterial contaminants, all the stuff that would have been filtered out by wastewater treatment or just water treatment.
The types of things where you see like fish advisories, like because the fish like are pumped full of mercury. That's because they exist in a part of the river or whatever body of water that has not been filtered in this way. We are not meant to drink that water, and we should not eat those fish.
No. So guys, if you just think about that situation, you think about the economic impact it's going to have on the city of Jackson, like the hospitality industry, the entire thing it's going to have to be put on pause again after going through the COVID break, basically in profits there that it's had. You think about each individual person, individual parents who are trying to, what do you do for your kid? Well, you get bottled water, and that's one of the only things you can do, or some other type of water product, right? Because you can't just turn on a tap anywhere in the entire city and get water. And the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is headed there. They've been there this whole week attempting to hand out as much bottled water as they can, obviously. And, you can kind of predict this and this, but there's not enough bottled water to go around. And it's just the nature of attempting a Herculean effort like that. It's not enough. The National Guard has even been called in by the governor. Even President Joe Biden declared an emergency recently this week. I believe that was yesterday, Tuesday, the 30th. Right. It's a big deal. And this is all happening, by the way, after a month of water boil advisory in Jackson. Guys, we live in Atlanta. We've been through our share of water boil advisories. And, generally when you experience one of those, at least that I've been through personally, it's a couple of days, week maximum, when there's been some kind of natural disaster or just something really bad that's come through the city. But can you imagine a full month?
And when they do it here or in other, places, it usually feels like, in an abundance of caution, we advise you, boil your water. It would be a good idea, or drink bottled water, as opposed to definitely don't drink the water and may God have mercy on your soul. Can we also point out that Jackson, Mississippi is 82.47% African-American in its demographic makeup?
Yes. Yes, we can. This is true. It's really bad. This is a breaking story, so there's going to be a lot more development, probably even by the time you hear this story when it comes out on the Monday that you're hearing it. But we're trying to just stay on top of it and follow it as much as possible. I would highly recommend heading over to MississippiToday.org. It's a really great nonprofit news site where there's just tons of information being pumped out. It appears to be really great reporting, at least to my eyes. There's so many articles they've written. It's Alex Rosier. I'm not exactly sure how you say it, but writing alongside Bobby Harrison, Kaylee Skinner, and a couple others. They're just answering questions for people of Mississippi. Mm-hmm. So people who are in and around Jackson They've got great resources there, like exactly where you can go physically right now if you're in or near Jackson to get water. If you just scroll down on their main website, they've got it, and it's continually updated there.
And one thing that's important to note, we're talking about specifically something called the O.B. Curtis facility. And the folks who are working there now are in crisis mode, like many municipal employees, several of whom are in the audience with us today. Welcome, folks. They are likely underpaid. They're definitely overworked. And they are at the whims, often, of machinations far above their heads, right? Far above their ability to control. So there's another point I want to make. It is a larger, deeper point. It is unexpected, right? Ideally, on paper, it is unexpected for a person in the United States to need to purify or boil water, to have a boil advisory. As Noel pointed out, it's usually phrased as something small happened, but with an abundance of caution, we advise you to do such and such. This is not the case in many, many other parts of the world. It is simply expected that one must either boil water or one must have bottled water of some sort. So what is happening here, I would say, is something that a lot of our international listeners are going to be intimately familiar with as the average day to day. But if you are listening and you are in the US or Canada or some parts, not all parts, don't believe the hype, of Western Europe, this is something that you can put in your journal as a harbinger of things to come. Not a Jordan Harbinger, very nice, brilliant guy, but a general harbinger of things to come.
General Harbinger?
General Harbinger. Thank you for your
we
service.
Salute you. And may God have mercy on your soul.
The water crisis isn't coming, folks. It's already here. And the heroic efforts, as you said, Matt, the Herculean efforts to make water potable, drinkable, they are only going to become more arduous and more challenging as time continues. Just something to think about every time you ask yourself, should I take a bath or take a shower?
But either way, I mean, that's not even the main issue here, guys. This is an infrastructure story. Like, that's seriously what's at the heart of this.
Yeah.
The mayor, Chokwe Lumumba, made a point that, hey, this is not something that may have happened. We've seen this on the horizon for some time, for several years, actually. We've noted that this specific facility, the O.B. Curtis Water Treatment Facility, it's failing, and it's going to fail. It's not a matter of if, but when, and it just happened to occur now because of the catastrophic flooding. And I wonder how many other cities, no matter what size they are and no matter what country they're in, have water treatment facilities that are on the brink of failure, just because of the amount of water that needs to be pushed through those things.
Flint.
And,
Right.
and how old
Just
they
saying.
are.
Right.
Just saying, Flint.
Where the water is no longer flammable, hopefully. But that's an enormous point, Matt. And you're a mind reader. I was getting at that too. The infrastructure systems are already under tremendous stress. You know what I mean? Like, it's a situation where if you think of that system the way you would think of an anatomical system, like a body, and its agglomeration of natural systems, it is to the point where any event, not even a black swan event, any bad day, could lead to a catastrophic series of dominoes. And it's easy to hear about a story like this if you don't live in Jackson, Mississippi. It's easy to hear about it if you don't have family or friends in Jackson, Mississippi, and then say, oh gosh, thank goodness I don't live there. But it's on tour, sadly. Statistically, in the United States, it is on tour, and it is coming to a town near you. If I had to guess, I would say most likely the next wave of these things that will occur, the next wave of these dangerous events they won't be in the Los Angeles, they won't be in the New Yorks, they won't be in the Chicagos, because those are very, very densely populated and in some ways very densely funded parts of this country. What they're going to be doing is they're going to be happening in the towns outside of Chicago. They're going to be happening in the rural areas of, Arizona or another very thirsty state.
Wouldn't you say Flint was kind of a harbinger of this? I mean, it wasn't flooding, but it was about infrastructure. It was about like old, outdated pipes with rust and all kinds of crazy stuff that just wasn't addressed, by the powers that be, and it should have been.
Well, it's about funding. Like our city is going to get funding, either via the state or via federal spending. In this case, the EPA entered into an agreement, at least according to CNN, with Jackson to provide 74, I think maybe $75 million to repair drinking water systems. But then the mayor of Jackson, Lumumba, said, oh no, it's going to take $2 billion to repair this water treatment facility, to fully replace it. Like this 74 million, 75 million is not going to do anything really. And now and then it's who do you believe, right? Do you actually need that much money? And if you do, well, dang, we should probably invest that money somehow. But where does it come from? And it becomes a political decision.
Priorities and do you value life first, or do you value other political kind of maneuvers that you can make as a politician? That's how
you value elections first.
That's right.
Always.
That's right. Where's life on that list? It's way down.
Yeah, I don't know.
Way low. Yeah.
Anyway, I think we're just gonna have to continue watching this. I hope everybody in or around Jackson, if you're listening, I hope you're safe. Do what you got to do. Write to us and let us know what you're going through right now. If you've been through something like this in another city, we'd love to hear your experience. And if you have any more information about budgets and how they get allocated to water treatment facilities, we'd love to hear from you too. And while we wait to hear from you, we're going to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
All right, and we have returned. Thanks so much, everybody. We're going long. We only have a little bit of time here, but hopefully it will be worth your time, the only real currency. Today's question: should plants have legal rights? Now, a number of years ago, there was this fantastic conversation across so many disciplines regarding the idea of what's called legal personhood. And this was applied to the concept of higher order animals. When I say higher order, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm talking about animals, non-human animals, that are able to perform some of the cognitive tricks that were once thought unique to the genre of primates, currently calling itself human today. This is stuff like the idea of abstract thought, planning for the future, the idea of deception, the idea of understanding oneself, of metacognition, thinking about thinking. That's what happens when you look in a mirror and say, oh, that's not me, but is it kind of me, but it's not me? Some animals can do that too. It's amazing, right? And this argument, or this quandary, is moving forward in the world of plants. Related to this episode on legal personhood, we earlier did an investigation on whether or not plants, yes, fellow green thumbs, this is for you, whether or not plants could fit the definition of an intelligent being. Now, of course, the human canon, the human ivory tower, is at a disadvantage here because that's a species that has yet to arrive at a real definition of intelligence, has yet to arrive at the concept of a soul, has yet to arrive at a concept of sentience. This stood out to me. I would say this is technically strange news, but you're not going to see a debate about it on your media avenue of choice. The idea came up in the news recently in some of the forums I follow, but it's largely inspired by a wonderful book that was written a few years ago called Brilliant Green, The Surprising History and Science of Plant Intelligence by a plant neurobiologist named Stefano Mancuso, along with journalist Alessandra Viola. And this, I don't know, do you guys remember the episode we did on plant intelligence or the possibility thereof?
Oh, it's been a minute, but I mean, I'm fascinated by the idea. I'm always like talking about mushrooms and their like networks of underground, like synapses and stuff. I do think it's a thing. No question about it.
I do remember being fascinated specifically with carnivorous plants and how that evolution occurred. And then like what caused that to happen. I don't think we ever got to the bottom of whether or not plants think, because we just can't tell yet. But I remember how interested I was in the topic.
Yeah, it is fascinating, man. I'm right there with you, because it's an older idea that needs more attention. Charles Darwin studied plants as well as animals for decades and decades, and he ate them while he was studying, by the way. He was one of the first Western thinkers to say, hey, plants, carnivorous and non-carnivorous, they move and respond to sensation. I would love for any of us listening along in the audience today to go and talk to your plants while you water them, and then get back to me and let me know if you see a change in their growth pattern and whether you think that is some sort of vibe, whether you think that is just that you are exhaling gases that are good for them, or, whether they instantly died, which means you might be a bad conversationalist. Like, I put that on you. Sorry, folks, forgive me. But the idea is responding to stimulus from an environment. It is the nature of life, right? That's the reason rocks are apparently always rocks, unless they're naturally soft and they just harden up when you touch them. Just blew some minds in a freshman dorm somewhere. But this is strange, because if we get to the root of it, we see that plants do exercise action in their environment, which indicates, at least, people get mad when you say understanding or desire, but it indicates moves toward things that are good for them and away from things that are bad for them. We know, for instance, human beings may pursue things that are technically low-level poisons, right? Like people recreationally enjoy capsaicin, right? And that is something that has evolved to deter consumption of plants, of certain
spicy,
plants, right?
Right.
Yeah. And
peps, yeah.
And we know that people and other forms of animals on this planet have enjoyed fermented things, which, contain alcohol or some relation of alcohol that can also be damaging to a bodily system. But I've been thinking more.
Or psilocybin.
Mm-hmm. Well, psilocybin is not necessarily damaging to a bodily system. I just
mean in terms of like things that plants beget that we enjoy. Also fruit. I mean, there's like a whole symbiosis with plants that we have this relationship with them, and we've tested it and we know what will kill us and what won't. So there's an interesting sort of entry point to interacting with plants. Like in terms of like life on Earth. Yeah,
I'm drawing a bright line around those first two examples because they are things that are potentially dangerous to living forms. Unlike psilocybin, it's not naturally dangerous, which, despite what the war on drugs would have us believe. So when I was thinking about this, I was looking at a couple of fantastic articles. I reread part of Brilliant Green, and I went out on this patio I have where I'm living now and just watched the plants move And I want to get kind of meta with this in the small amount of time.
Smarter than us, man.
I mean, they know what they want. You can't say that about every human.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a system. It's a very honed system. That's all I'm saying.
So part of my question is, this is also a setup for an episode I think we could visit in the future. But part of my question for you guys, this not to trick you into an interview, this is a series of me asking you and our fellow conspiracy realists what you think. Part of my question here, before we get to the meta aspect, is simply put this. If ever there were a widespread academic recognition of plants having some sort of legal right, not just the tree that owns itself, out in Athens, Georgia, but something like something that says for legal purposes, destroying a forest is the same thing as mass murder. What would that mean for the world? Do you think that's even a thing that should or could happen? I don't think it could, but should it?
Well, it is illegal to set forests on fire unless you're a logging corporation or like a company that like owns it and can just like do it, unchecked. But it's a very interesting question because some of the things that I'm fascinated by involve being able to take of these things that these plants provide. And if all of a sudden the plant had this personhood, you'd have to like ask permission or something. But if you want to take the hippie kind of dippy perspective, it's like the plants want you to eat them. Like the psilocybin wants you to eat them. Like they're part of this system of the earth, like in terms of like that like network of these like underground networks of like electrically communicating kind of synapses that are mushrooms that are this like kind of circle of life and existence. And like, they're not, I won't go so far as to say that they're there for us, but like they are a way of interacting with them. You eat a plant, you're not killing the plant exactly because it's just going to regrow itself. It's like cutting a lizard's tail off, like the ones that regrow. So I think it's fascinating. It's not like so even vegetarians who are so anti-factory farming and stuff, they're all about eating plants, and they're the ones that have the most aggressive opinions on life of any of us. So it's a very interesting question. Is all. I don't know the answer. Matt, what do you think, dude?
I just had a very, very clear picture of Norman Borlaug with a bullhorn standing up on a platform, and there's a wheat field, and he asks,
is it okay? Is it okay now? Is it still okay?
We need you to feed us. Is that okay? And then
can we have your consent? Can you sign this PDF? Can you sign this Adobe document?
I don't know. To me, it was just a very funny image. But what do we do at that point?
Mm-hmm.
If plants have some kind of personhood, have some kind of sentience that we acknowledge, like what do we do to feed ourselves?
That
but isn't it about us quantifying
extraterrestrial entities that contact us are not plant or fungi based?
So we could eat them.
Well, we they don't come up there. They don't come rocking through this little backwater of this little backwater galaxy and say, "Holy crap! What if they're based on carnivorous plants, man?" Like what if they come through and they say, "Oh my gosh, our versions of flies are eating us, nuke it," or whatever our version of nuke is. I don't think that'll happen, but I do think it is an idea that the human species could leverage to be a little bit less of an unsustainable fad, a little bit less uncool to the superorganism of Earth. I know a lot of vegans and vegetarians. I was a vegetarian for myself for some time. I was privileged enough to be so, which is an important point. But also, there's this metacognitive argument, right? Like we also, it goes to so many levels, and I think it's worth revisiting in an actual episode because we have to ask ourselves, is there a hierarchy of life, right? The vegan, the vegetarian says, I know this is a living thing. I wish to not do harm to others, perhaps, but I also need to live. And like any human being, I will put my survival over literally everything. What happens when you tell thousands of people who depend upon deforestation in a given area that they cannot feed their families because they cannot interrupt this great dance, this great cycle of life that has continued millions of years before people were around. It's politically difficult, but also, again, politics is just sort of another religion that humans have made up. And there's not
money.
Yeah, well, money as well. I still have the standing call for anyone to tell me the difference between modern economic belief and religious belief.
Well, they're aligned. Politics and money are like, two hands in the same glove.
Kind of Methodist and Baptist.
Exactly.
I feel you. But the idea here is, to me, it's fascinating because we know a lot of people who are close with plants. And this is an open call, by the way. You don't even need to use the show contact information. You want to find me on social media at Ben Bolin or something, send me your pictures of your plants. I am here for it. I love plants. They're some of my favorite living things. And if you have a plant in your life, if you live around plants, then I am almost certain that if you are human and live around plants, even if you are a botanist and well-trained, you have probably anthropomorphized them a bit. You've given them names.
They say talk to them, sing to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, you've given them names. You give them personalities. You might have put some plants next to each other and you can tell whether or not they vibe. And there's chemistry with that too. Plants do talk to one another in such that they communicate. They exude or emanate different chemical signals. Plants scream to their kinfolk.
Oh, wow.
When they are being hurt. They transmit signals. When you are mowing the grass, you monster.
Where have you seen this? Where is the study? I'm so fascinated by this. I was going to ask you, is it about pain, like animals versus plants? Is it about pain? And how do you register this, what you're describing? I'm so fascinated by this idea.
Sure.
But the life cycle of a plant in most cases is to get its seeds ingested.
Right.
That's the way it's evolved,
it's such a simple system.
Be eaten so that we may spread.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't understand why it would be, I guess it would still be painful, but it's also purposeful.
And then also, what is the balance of chemicals we would need, Matt, to communicate to the plant that there is some sort of, in our opinion, greater good?
Is there an afterlife for plants? I'm sorry. This is a whole episode. This is amazing. There's an amazing record called Mort Garson Plantasia. It's a modular synth record from the 60s, and it was designed to play for your plants with the understanding that it would help them grow. So there are all these things that we're talking about. It comes from this kind of counterculture, psychedelic movement of the idea that plants are sentient and that we are participating with them in this life cycle. But no one of all those people, they never are I'm worried if I'm going to hurt the plant if I eat one of its leaves. They're the plant welcomes me to eat of its leaves, as opposed to the cow who we put in a pen and hook up a thing to its teats and just suck the life force out of it. And those things actually scream. You can hear it. It's awful. It's fascinating to me on so many levels.
And we don't have time now, but to let you know the specifics, I'll reference this in an upcoming episode. The research I read that was most compelling was in 2021, I want to say, after we had recorded whether or not plants are intelligent. There was this study out of Tel Aviv, I believe it was, that went it's focusing specifically on tomato and tobacco plants. And then it shows through literally holding a microphone. It shows that when under stress, they emit frequencies that are inaudible to, the average human ear, between 20 to 100 kilohertz. I hope I haven't ruined, anybody's vegetarian feast or whatever. I have plants. I eat them all the time. Most people do or should. So we want to hear your thoughts. What kind of conversations have you had with your plants? What do you think about the future of water? Where do you stand on the banning of books? Is it always a bad thing? Are there some books that should not be read? We think there's definitely one you should read, which we're pretty explicit about because we'll get dragged in the street and shot if we don't mention it. So stuff there, what you know, the book.
What Ben said is 100% true.
Right. Yeah. They're after us. That Honda Odyssey is idling on my street right now. And Matt's not laughing because he's looking out the window and sees a van too. But seriously, we can't wait to hear from you. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. You can find us online where we are Conspiracy Stuff. On Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. We're Conspiracy Stuff Show on Instagram. And if you don't want to do any of those things, you give it a try. Dip your toe on the internet. It's a big world out there. Lots of info. You can also give us a telephone call.
Yes, you can. Call 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool code name. We don't care what it is. Just keep it a little anonymous, and then we'll know who you are next time you call. You've got 3 minutes. Use it however you'd like. Please let us know if you give us permission to use your voice and message on one of our listener mail episodes. Hey, and if you don't want to do that at all, and you just want to contact us with words, try our email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.